evening to everyone. Before I begin, I must give a virtual standing ovation to Mr. Dele Farotimi as he articulated many of our thoughts so eloquently and confidently. And he said nothing but the truth. And so I'm very honored. You know, I followed him. I'm a great admirer of his and how he speaks so confidently and speaks truth to power. So I'm something that I respect greatly. So I'm honored to be in the same event as you, sir. Now, I'm also honored to be here. I do believe we'll share a mix of feelings being here today, mine being of joy and sadness. As to my feelings of joy, it is my sincerest pleasure to witness the engagement in our political arena, particularly amongst our youths, the joy of being amongst fighters for justice and fairness here today, to be amongst thinkers and well-wishers of our great nation, Nigeria. And as to my feelings of sadness, it is that in the year 2023, we're still having to deal with elections fraught with disenfranchisement, disillusionment, suppression, violence, and a blatant disregard for the rule of law. A previous speaker made a statement. He said, and I quote, "I was blind, but now I can see." There is honor in recognizing one's errors and owning them, making amends by changing course and doing what is right. And so that very popular phrase, "I was blind, but now I can see," as a creative, I cannot help but be reminded of the Oedipus plays, right, which is a tragic Greek story. And I'll quote a dialogue here today where Oedipus speaks to the blind prophet Tiresias, which states, "Blind as you are, you can feel all the more what sickness haunts our city. You, my lord, are the one shield, the one savior we can find." To which Tiresias replies, "So you mock my blindness? Let me tell you this. You, with your precious eyes, you're blind to the corruption of your life, to the house you live in, and those you live with." These quotes come to mind whenever I think of Nigeria, right? As those who can see turn to the blind for directions. And while the blind can see the ills in our great nation, those who can see have turned a blind eye. Of course, it is no surprise why our supposed servicemen and women have turned a blind eye, but more so why and how we've allowed them to get away with it for so long. And so, like the other speaker said, consequences is almost non-existent in Nigeria, right? Listening to all the speakers addressing the issues here with background on history for context to the Nigerian people, I suddenly felt the need to pivot to a slightly different direction with my opening remarks and direct it, right, to mostly my fellow Nigerians, my brothers and sisters, so uniquely and beautifully diverse, but chastise each other, even though we share the same heritage, to my brothers and sisters who take up arms to maim and kill each other, to those who deliberately spread misinformation, to my brothers and sisters who accommodate wrongdoing to justify persons of questionable character, visibly corrupt character. So I want to ask them this question: are you blind, or have you simply turned a blind eye? Like Mr. Dele said, we constantly have conversations like this and we trust our friends to tell us the truth. But we know countries will always do what's in their best interest. And as Nigeria continues to export its greatest resources, other countries will continue to exploit that. We can point to the gains and profits and unhealthy hold onto power by our political elites. And so I ask to the average Nigerian who has allowed themselves to be used, brainwashed, and cajoled to defending criminality, to defend the constant, unrelenting assault on our constitution and our fragile democracy, what are your own gains? MC Oloma was mentioned earlier. He's got children here. There must be something fundamentally wrong that our statesmen, and of course he's not a statesman, but as Mr. Dele described when he gave his edict and there was a policeman standing not too far, I also saw that clip myself. You might as well think he is. What is fundamentally wrong that they think that they can do and send their kids and invest outside the country while they just tap and tap and tap from each and every one of us? Because I hope your answer isn't merely the chicken change that lines your pocket. I hope your answer isn't merely that he or she is my tribesman or tribeswoman. For how have these flimsy reasons earned our nation the great it is so often paired with? Nigeria has the potential to rock shoulders with other thriving democracies. And even if you give us half the chance, I believe we will surpass many. With our greatest assets, like I've just said, being our people. While Nigerians have had to deal with unnecessarily tough, harsh, and exasperating conditions, we are just built different because we strive to the top despite the odds. There are notable names of Nigerian origin across the globe achieving greatness in their fields, from Chimamanda Adichie, a globally renowned author, to Bennett Omalu, a Nigerian and an American physician, forensic pathologist. He's a neuropathologist. He was the first to discover and publish findings on chronic traumatic encephalopathy. The list is endless, but many owe their gratitude to external functioning societies because they've been instrumental to their success, either through a functioning educational sector or just the environment where they can freely express that potential. But in Nigeria, our greatest assets are being killed off like flies. There is no reprieve in sight. Our young children, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers are kidnapped, brutalized, extorted every day in various parts of the country in Nigeria. Our schools have been in a toxic relationship with our government, leading to strikes after strikes. Our medical doctors are fleeing the country for better opportunities. Power supply is abysmal. And our young resources are proud to say, I have Japa. So are you blind or have you turned a blind eye? This continuous cycle of supremely unqualified, visionless leaders have made the phrase, Nigeria will happen to you, so true. It has made lawlessness a norm. On Christmas Day, a power-drunken, trigger-happy policeman shot a young woman dead by the name of Omo Bolanle Rahim while she was returning back from a church service with her husband. She was a lawyer. In October 2020, the Nigerian army, acting on orders from above, opened fire on peaceful protesters. In 2020, a police officer attached to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, shot a newspaper vendor by the name of Ifeanyi Chukwu Elechi in the head. We've seen photos of a young man who was wielding a machete during the EndSARS campaign, protest, campaigning with the APC in the just concluded gubernatorial elections in Lagos. A woman who's my personal hero by the name of Jennifer Efidi was stabbed while queuing to vote in Lagos. Rivers State speaks for itself. More recently, former Deputy Senate President Ike Ekweremadu was sentenced to jail along with his wife. You may not see the connection here, but Nigeria happened to him. If resources are used for what it ought to be used for, if our medical sector got the support it ought to have gotten, and our leaders led by example and patronize their country's medical facilities, just maybe he would have gotten away with his lawless behavior. The environment these unqualified, greedy politicians have created is one of lawlessness. And that is what emboldened him to take that behavior outside to a functioning society where he was caught, tried, and convicted. And I will say rightfully so. These few examples are less than a drop of water in an ocean when it comes to the conduct of our servicemen and women. And as unreal as it may sound, victims often suffer the consequences of the actions of those sworn to protect them, while they, the perpetrators, either get a slap on the wrist or get away with it. As we saw in the just concluded elections in Nigeria, where the perpetrators of violence are walking around scot-free. Beneficiaries of the ruling class have claimed that they have a right to choose who they want, and that is democracy. That is true. But you cannot seriously acquit the process with which your choice candidate or the Independent National Electoral Commission conducted, participated, and concluded these elections. You simply, in all honesty, cannot acquit them. And while re-narrating the facts, because everyone has talked about it, surrounding these just concluded elections would be beating an already dead horse, it is no secret that the 2023 elections were marred by incidents of violence, electoral malpractice, reports of ballot box snatching, vote buying, intimidation of voters. It's widespread. The facts are there. Are you blind? These incidents and these actions have undermined the credibility of the process already, that was already standing on fragile, thin legs. It's eroding constantly, day by day, the public trust in our fragile democracy. How do we not see this? So for those who have openly turned a blind eye, like despicable characters such as Femi Fani-Kayode or Festus Keyamo, who swings from pillar to post, enduring more than a pendulum, will look you in the face of facts and tell a bold-faced lie. Nothing speaks more of one's untrustworthy, stomach protectorate character when their past utterances fact checks their recent lies. Surely we must see this, no? Well, I have refused to turn a blind eye, and certainly would not be silent while a perjurous, convicted, unidentified, unhealthy individual by the name of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who has been forced on an entire nation. Not only is this a monumental disgrace, but it's a global one. While I am a strong advocate for freedoms of expression and our fundamental human rights, I cannot for the life of me understand how this level of evil can be packaged as good. I cannot understand how I could give an armed robber the keys to my house with some fantastical imagination and hope that the armed robber would protect my belongings. So let me conclude, because this is such a sensitive topic for many of us. You know, people have thrown all sorts of names and stuff for me, like you're an entertainer. I've always been an activist. I've never been politically correct. I've never been a part of any NGO. I've always just done my thing, and I'm still doing my thing. My experiences and the direction with which this country is going has also informed my own actions moving forward. I want to see a country that works for me, my generation, for you, your generation. As like I said at the start, we are brothers and sisters. And so I'm personally burdened by the question of how do we overcome this? And so many of you, very, very honorable people that I've listened to today, have offered different solutions. And I'm going to offer one that may seem quite naive or may seem quite generic, but I believe that we will overcome by uniting. There is a unity waiting to be explored in Nigeria. They know it. They see it, and they see its potential to drive them all to where they belong, which for the most part, most of them do belong in jail. We must see it. We must see the benefit of our unity. We saw a glimpse of that during the EndSARS. And the so-called people who tell you all types of cock and bull stories to give you the impression that they're here for you, were all running and leaving the country because they thought that EndSARS protesters, as peaceful as we were coming to burn down the country, which is not the case. We cannot continue to turn a blind eye to this consistent abuse of our great nation. We must see the hope. We must see what Nigeria, void of ravaging politicians with nothing to offer but debt and death to our nation, we must see what that Nigeria is. We simply need to open our eyes. And I sincerely hope you do, because I, myself, you yourself cannot do it alone. We have to do it together.